Hello, I'm Mike Lacher with Industrial Lubricant. So we're going to talk about a red fault light on the control box. The real simple way to fix it is to check the grease. Make sure there's some damn grease in there, right? So if it's empty, fill her up, pull the gauge out, and run a bunch of manual lube cycles till you purge all the air out. You'll hear it coming out. You'll see the grease run clean. And reinstall the gauge. Hit the manual lube cycle again. Ensure that it builds pressure up above 2,000. And the pressure switch shuts it off and the red light goes out. You're good to go. All right, keep in mind if you have a red fault light and you are building grease pressure above 2,000, say to 2,000 to 2,300, the system will still continue to grease. It'll still count strokes. It's functioning just fine. All the red light does is indicate to you that we're not building pressure. But obviously if you got pressure on the grease pressure gauge and the pins are all moving on the injectors, that means you're lubing just fine, but you're still getting a red light. The pressure switch is bad. So at your nearest convenience, replace the pressure switch when you can. Don't rig it out and think it ain't working. When you got grease pressure, it's working. So it's just a bad pressure switch. Okay, I want to go through the configuration of the injection bank manifold assembly, the pressure switch, and the gauge. We've got the main line grease coming in here, across over to the gauge, and pay close attention to the way this is orientated. If you have this any other way, you will fail this pressure switch prematurely. And it won't take you long to fail it, and I'll explain that why to you, but make sure that it looks just like this. If you have this pressure switch over here, the grease never gets freshened up. It stays over here, gets packed out, creates a plug in the pressure switch, and it will fail prematurely. If you have it orientated like this, the grease will come by and it'll always be fresh grease coming by. And these pressure switches will last at least a year, maybe 2 years with this configuration. Any other way, 2, 3, 4 months, the pressure switch has failed and you've got a problem. I want to talk to you about sand contamination in the grease system. So if you have low grease pressure, no grease pressure, a lot of it's going to go back to the sand contamination inside the system. So what I want you to check is the vent valve. Vent valve line number 2, main grease line going to the vent valve, grease output line going to the injector bank. Pull vent valve line number 2 off at the fitting, manually cycle the pump. If you have grease coming out of this fitting, the vent valve is not closing, not allowing it to build grease pressure, and that is your problem. Replace the vent valve and you're done. Okay, so if the vent valve is closing over there after you popped vent valve line 2 off and you didn't find any grease coming out of the vent valve, then I want you to come over here and crack this safety unloader line. So just unscrew this line right from here, cycle the pump. If you got grease coming out of here, you've got a bad safety unloader and it's just dumping it right back in the tank. Replace this and it'll fix the problem. If you don't have any grease coming out, sometimes due to the massive amounts of sand we find inside of these systems, this check valve will actually plug completely solid with sand, not allowing anything to come out. So take the check valve out, disassemble it, wash it out with brake clean, whatever you have on site, reassemble it, and you'll go right back to work. So if you've checked everything that we just went through here and everything checks out and you still don't have any grease pressure coming out of the system, you're going to have to replace the pump. It needs to be rebuilt. It's a fully rebuildable pump, so don't throw it away. Get it back to the shop. We'll get it picked up and rebuilt.